Found Behind the Book. Conversations all about the makings of Lost and Found, finding the power in your voice. I'm here to talk with a wonderful fellow artist about Lost and Found, finding the power in your voice. My recent memoir, I'm calling it a creative memoir, that I released last July. Again, I can't believe it's actually almost coming on a year since it's been out. And so this conversation series, hi Mo, this conversation series, I wanted to do something where I could just talk with folks who've been involved with this process for me. And Alicia is such an esteemed artist and someone I really respect, and I'm so happy. Let's see if we can hear you now.
You hear me now?
Better.
Okay.
Okay.
It may be an internet issue, but
yes.
There won't be any issue.
Okay, I think I'm getting you mostly. This is good. This is good. Well, welcome, Alicia. Thank you so much for being here. Oh my goodness. So I just want to introduce you for folks who are joining us live and for folks when you watch this back. Alicia Hines is a writer, an editor, a chef. That's how I met Alicia, was through her culinary artistic expression. And also I would say, is it fair to say a curator or co-curator as well? Is that like one of the hats you wear? Yes. Oh, it's a little bit choppy. Can't hear you. Oh, wait, I'm not really getting you. It might be an internet thing. Internet. Let's see. Maybe I think Alicia's trying another Wi-Fi. I know. We never know what the internet's gonna do. So I'm just gonna share while Alicia is figuring out her internet that Alicia and I met through Looking Glass Arts. And I'm really glad for the folks who are on this call live. And even if you watch it afterwards, if you don't know Looking Glass Arts, I highly, highly encourage you to research them. This is a wonderful non-for-profit that some friends of ours created. It's an artist residency that is centered on supporting artists of color to create work, to dream, to rest outside of the city. So they have a beautiful farm and a barn space. Yes, that's better.
Yay, okay, we're getting there.
Okay, we're getting there. Talk about like sound and vibration, internet. Oh my goodness. So tell me, I was just sharing how we met through Looking Glass Arts and how amazing that space is, and we'll talk more about that. But you were just starting to say like your connection to curation and what that is like for you, like how you've been working in that realm.
So I started an organization called Mask Consortium, and that kind of started out of a space of wanting to examine the relationship between museums and artists, and looking at ways in which museums can work with artists to bring more community engagement into museum spaces, but also encourage museums to live up to their, I guess, as custodians of works of art. Their service is to the larger community, and so it was a way for us to have museums kind of break down the barrier between itself or a large institution and the folk, right? The people making art and doing that sort of thing. So that's kind of how Mask started out. And one of our first major projects was with the Chazen Museum of Art at the University of Wisconsin, Madison, and that was the Emancipation Project, which is we were just starting to work on that when I was up at Looking Glass that summer, you know, right,
Yeah. And I
like
remember you.
writing grants for Emancipation for that project. A grant we didn't end up getting, but nonetheless, it was a important exercise for us.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many things we could talk about. It's like trying to decide, which things to choose. I remember you telling me, just starting to tell me about that project, and I was like, like it just sounded like so much possibility and so much, and really needed, right? I love the way that you were just bringing in, looking at how space is created and how it's supporting or inviting to the public or not. Um, you I want to just go back because, that was like yet another thing that I found out Alicia did, because we met in this, wonderful space in the summer. We were both invited for the Friends and Family Week, right? So there's this Friends and Family Week, which is kind of like a looser week up at Looking Glass.
Right.
And it was you, myself, Patrice,
Yeah.
right, and Marika.
And
Exactly. And it was like this kind of almost like just unexpected, but then kind of expected, divine, wonderful connection, a week of just connection and conversation. And I was thinking about it today, and I was just thinking how I feel like as artists, particularly in the city, often as parents or not, you know what I mean? Often it's like, oh my gosh, can I just get some peace so I can get some work done? And how getting up there was like this whole other added element where I remembered the importance of just conversation and connection. How that really feeds whatever work we're doing, right? And I just remember feeling like this sort of sense of actually physical relief at meeting you all and being like, this was the piece that I needed too for the project. And I don't know how that felt to you, what that was like what you were going to Looking Glass wanting, and what it felt like for you.
So I think you yourself just touched on a lot right there too, even in that moment, because I was sitting here thinking about, all right, yeah, I do a lot of things, and what can I really say if someone says, what do you do? And then I thought of something really sort of trite, but not really, like, I'm a soldier in Love's army, right? Like that's what I am, really, because it's pretty much like I'm waiting for orders from whenever they come, and then it's like, okay, so you got to go love this, you got to go figure out why this thing needs love, or why we need to investigate this thing and give it a little more love. Like, so meeting a lot of that out, really exploring our connection to each other. A lot of the time people say like, oh, we're all connected, but like if you really, really get down to it, we actually really, really are. It's just that we have to find each other, right? Sometimes that's in the physical form, like when we meet face to face. Sometimes it's in the metaphysical form when we hear a song or something and we feel this deep connection, and like, I hear The Makings of You by Curtis Mayfield, and I literally, the tears just start coming out of my eyes. Like, I just can't. So whatever that is, that's not fake, right? That's about connection to each other. I know Marika because she and my husband, well, my sister-in-law, they are childhood friends. And Marika was actually like Mark's first crush. He used to tell stories about coming out from the back when she was over and like playing his guitar, like just trying to be like, oh, I'm strumming on my guitar, in front of Marika, because she's this talented, brilliant, incredible cellist, right?
Yes.
And I can't even remember now how it is that Marika and I ended up connecting. But the short of it is I saw the applications for the Goldfinch Writers Retreat, and that's the retreat for writers over the age of 45, may or may not have, mostly not have published in major outlets, to take a week and actually receive an honorarium and be there and write, and no deliverables. You don't have to show, like, this is what I did with the time that I was there. And I was like, this is excellent. I'm going to apply for this thing. Like, this seems to be written for me. Yeah, I'm ready, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I did it. And I get an email a few weeks later from Marika, and I'd seen her at it was maybe the Tribeca Film Festival, where a friend of mine was doing a film, and Steph Christian was performing. I mean, it was just a whole confluence of events. And she's like, so Willa, who's her partner at Looking, Willa was looking over this application, and she sees this, talking about this Jamaican woman from Brooklyn who opened a restaurant, but she's also an educator. And Mariko's like, Alicia Hines? And basically, like, oh, that's really amazing. So it wasn't nepotism. I actually was going to make it into the writer's retreat. But when Marika found out that it was me and I was doing that, and they were looking for a chef actually that summer for all of the retreats, she was like, hey, sister. And I was like, I would love to do that. I would love to do that. And that's one of those messages that came that was like, okay, so here's this thing. This touched your heart. You saw yourself in this. You love this. You love being out in the woods. You love, time to write. Like, what's so wrong? Go do that and see what happens. And so much in the last, like, what has it been, 2 years?
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like it, but because so much has happened and so much connection has developed since then that I'm like, yeah, this is what I do. Is I love things. I love people, and I love ideas, and figuring out what that's all about. Yeah.
Wow. I love to hear you just like say how you relate to the things that call you. And then because so this is really interesting, because a lot of what I'm writing about in this book is about how to connect to that inner voice, right? And I just hear you talking about how that's really how you like open yourself up to feeling, being called to what's the next project, rather than maybe putting on a title first. It sounds like you really kind of follow like where the universe or where your inner calling is calling you. And it's interesting because I've talked about this in the past couple conversations, that I separated the book into these 3 larger subheadings of your intuitive voice, the sound of your voice, and your artistic voice. And to me, it feels like I hear you in some ways talking about this connection to your intuition. And I'm just curious how you got confident at listening to that. Or like, how are you so easily, you just sound so accepting of following like what needs to be loved. How did you get that confidence? I don't know.
I thank you, first of all, for saying that I sound confident because I think it really is also from a place of uncertainty. I wouldn't call it fear, because I'm not a fear-based person, but I'm like, ooh, I'm nervous about that. And so sometimes it's that feeling. Like, I'm like, what is that? What is making my heart quiver? I don't know how to describe it. It's maybe where, like, oh, I'm getting this feeling, and I feel like I need to do this, and the way that I have to do it has to be a demonstration of loving kindness in some way. Like, all right, so before you met me, I opened a restaurant, right? One of the reasons I was coming back coming up to Looking Glass was because I just closed the restaurant, closed. during the pandemic. And I opened the restaurant in 2019 after struggling for 2 years to get it open after having retired from 20 years of teaching. I know I live.
Yes, you do.
So I was like, yeah, this is my lifelong dream. I love to cook. I've cooked my whole life. That was my quote unquote side hustle before we were calling it a pivot.
Yes.
Your side hustle was your thing. And my side hustle, my whole life through college, everything was always cooking. Like we catered parties. They called me Mama Feel Good. I used to make wings and cornbread, and we have big parties. So my whole kind of ideal was to have a space where writers, artists, musicians could come and eat really good food that would inspire them to create conversations, to talk to each other. And I had my entire library, not only my library from every book that I've read since I was an undergraduate, but also all the books I taught, just owned over the years. And I put them all in the space and was like, and it's a library. With all in the business plan. It wasn't even like I thought of it afterwards. This was part of my business plan. So you can imagine trying to sell a restaurant that's a library in the first place was hard. But I did it, right? And that for me was that love experiment. Like it's that experiment and like, all right, I know how to serve. I have done I'm a chef. I know mathematics. I know how to source food. I know all that stuff. Like I'm not trying to say that I'm kind of some dilettante. I'm like, I know how to do this. I can do it, right? But I'm not opening the traditional sort of restaurant in that way. It's more of sort of like a community hub kind of thing. But I got to find a way in. And to me, the food is going to be the way in. I'm going to do that thing. And then we're firing on all cylinders, and it's great. I had like a co-conspirators conference one month where we had live streams and people coming in. I had Rich Medina doing BLE, like we had Kung Fu Theater. It was a Jamaican Chinese restaurant.
Yes.
So we Saturday afternoon Kung Fu Theater where we would broadcast a film, but also like DJs, and we'd have a whole chat coming into the library, borrowing books or watching the film. Like it was just a whole thought experiment, love experiment of like what the possibility was. And then due to the demands of like how you had to run a restaurant during COVID, it became more about trying to figure out how to do takeout and all these other things, or fighting, not to be named food menu delivery platforms who were posting my menu without permission. Lots of things like that I had to reassess why I was doing this anymore. And then was it a love experiment anymore, or was this trying to prove something to somebody about opening a restaurant? So it's not to say that I fell out of love with cooking, but I definitely was not in love with the restaurant industry in the first place. So that's what I was doing for. So that's why really that closed. And when I was, well, what can I do now? What's the next thing that I can do? What do I love to do? I love to write. Let me figure out if that's something that I can do that can sustain me until I figure out the next thing.
Wow.
And that coincidentally sort of, it all kind of came together, starting the Mask Consortium, writing and doing all of that kind of all came together right in the midst of what was like really turmoil. And but for me was really, I think, the most love I've seen expressed like across social media. Like I remember like getting goosebumps at like 7 o'clock because you're hearing this echoing of people making noise for the first responders, like, and feeling that sense of like everybody, and there's not to say there wasn't difficulty and strife going on, but that feeling was something that I don't think I'll ever forget.
Wow. Thank you so much for just sharing for people who didn't know. And I knew a lot of this, but about the restaurant, because I remember when you told me about it, I was just like, oh my God, I want to be at that space. And what a beautiful, beautiful vision it was. And as somebody who loves to cook and as somebody who loves to eat, I just loved your whole vision of like creating a space that's sort of in a non-traditional restaurant, right? And in some ways, like I kind of feel like that with my book. Like I'm like, it's kind of a non-traditional memoir in a way. And I don't know, like, what do you think about that idea of like, did you feel like you were fitting into something because, or you, again, it just sounds like I love this sort of barometer of like the love experiment, like, using that in some ways as a barometer for anything that we do,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, yeah.
Well, I can say this, speaking of your book, that absolutely I appreciate it. So one, that you asked me to be a beta reader, I was like, and then you blessed me with those, I should have been wearing them, those beautiful earrings.
Yes.
And I was like, I love these. This is perfect. She knows me so well, like that, right? But what I really appreciated about reading your book, and it's kind of a lot about how I am as a writer as well, that you do fuse this idea of, you fuse together memoir, there's poetry, there's space for the reader to reflect. Um, it's not the sort of typical or traditional sort of memoir or traditional sort of self-help text, right? You're giving a lot. And I think I do that in my writing. I think I have a forebear that I have like spiritual forebears, people that I love. So there's like Zora Neale Hurston and there's Du Bois, people who write, but you can't say what kind of writer they are, because you're gonna read Du Bois visualizing Black America, and he's doing diagrams that represent, Black folk, but they're like visualizations that typical scientists or social scientists don't use or don't visualize them in the same way. Or he'll have a poem juxtaposed to a really interesting philosophical thought, right? So I like to emulate that, or when Zora Neale Hurston will break into, dialect.
Yeah.
Or like, or when the animals start talking, there's like a, crow funeral. That kind of stuff to me is really exciting in work, and it just, it disrupts your understanding of how to read, and in just enough ways to get you, going. And I appreciated that about your text. But I think that's kind of my approach. And I think the other thing is, I think why I still can use your text, because I also don't want to be like, so we've all got it figured out, me and you, we're confident and using our voices, and
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that. Like, I have to find power in my voice. Like, for example, I know what I sound like when I'm reading my work. I'm confident that the narrative voice is authentically mine. Like, that's, you read something that I've written, you know me, you're like, oh, I can hear Alicia saying that. But I can't necessarily hear myself saying these words. You know what I mean? Like, I'm like, do I sound like that when I'm talking to people? Is that what I'm hearing? I do have tendencies to, I will break into song and then patois, and we're like, well, my mother said this, and, like, or French. Like, when I was in Paris, oh my God, people would be like, so wait a minute, where are you from? Because I was speaking French and then go into English and then be like, oh, and you're on a doctor bomba, and then like, whoa, so I appreciate that. And, I learn language because of that, because I feel like as many ways as we can express ourselves, the better. But I think when I do that, and also the fact that I'm a Gemini, I'm like, well, what's my real
Right.
narrative voice? What is my real intuitive voice? Are those different? How can I express to folks those things that I'm about,
Yeah.
like, when I feel that. Like, it's weird to be like, ooh, right now I'm feeling this nervous energy going through my body. Does everybody want to know that? But maybe it's important to something. Maybe someone else is feeling that. And
Yeah. You know, it's so funny what you're saying about like thinking about different kind of the lineage of different Black writers who sort of bend and twist. And it's like I can't help but think as you're talking, I just feel like as folks of the African diaspora, it's just our nature to kind of shapeshift in whatever form we're in. And and you know, thankfully, for whatever reason, when I was writing this, I feel like I was not censoring that. I just knew to just go with it. It was easy. And I've been saying this, you know, that in so many ways, writing this book kind of gave me more permission to let myself be more free in my how I am approaching music, my own music. It was like kind of a reminder. It was like a whole sort of like 2.5 year journey of giving myself permission to, like, you know what, like scratch. There's like a bunch of self-censoring that like we just need to put out, and that sort of and really kind of also coming back to my roots in a way, because I was so raised in the context of artists who really didn't distinguish between like what type of music do you make and what type of dance do you make and what type. It's just like you're an artist, so you might paint and you might write poetry and you might. And I feel like even though we're in this era now where everybody's like multi-hyphenate, multidisciplinary, it still is breaking down some kind of barrier that I feel like really Western society and European traditions have kind of created. But I feel like, do you feel like that too? Like that Black folks, you know, that we have always been like, well, they're all, you know, I'm just doing me. So I love how you started with this idea of like you're just following whatever's calling to you.
I,
You know.
I think there are a couple of things. So it's like part of it is there are certain structures that we rely on. Like you need some kind of structure. We feel like to be like, all right, where is the terrain upon which I'm going to intervene? If you have no structure, then there's no ground, and then it's like, what are we doing? So we have to have kind of, we have kind of structure. Once we have that, then you can be like, I'm gonna disrupt. I'm gonna disrupt this structure, and it feels like this. And I'm not disrupting it just for the sake of disruption or like creating chaos. I'm disrupting it because actually I do love this. Yeah. There's something about this that I love. I care about this, but I have to figure out a way to intervene in a way that's different. So I think of them as like those two things: disruptions or interventions or experiments. Experiments in this thing that we love to do.
Yeah.
And so art, you know, there's a structure around art and what people say is art and how we define art. And if you are an artist, what things are in your purview when you're going around looking to demonstrate and give your art to the world.
Yeah.
So then you have to, okay, so now I know that ground and I'm pretty familiar with that ground. I remember, I can't remember. It was a music conference years ago. Oh, it was like a house music conference, Mikasa, in Santa Barbara. Never been there, but
Wow.
one thing I remember from that conference was a panel, and there were a bunch of producers there, and they were talking about knowing your instrument, and it was like, you know, talking about Casio two-tone or like Pro Tools or whatever it was. Like, you literally, if you are going to say you're an artist, you kind of really have to know everything about what that machine does. Like, you have to know everything about what that machine does before you can decide that you're going to be Jay Dilla and like fuck it up.
Right.
You actually have to know the thing first. So similarly, we kind of have to know the thing that we are disrupting. But then life is a life of learning, right? You got to spend your whole life learning something. So we think we know the structure, but it's constantly changing. We're always going to be there trying to learn more about it because we love it. And because we love it, we're going to try to figure out how to fuck it up. Like, let's go in there and like experiment with this thing. Let's see what can it withstand? How much can it tolerate? What happens if you do this to it?
Yeah. Yeah.
We know it and we love it and we feel like it's resilient enough to
Mm-hmm.
bear those things that we do.
Mm-hmm.
Real.
Okay. Woo. Yes, indeed. Absolutely.
See, so like I hear myself saying stuff like this and I'm like, where's that voice come from that says that? I don't necessarily know. Like, straight up, like you are in your book. I don't necessarily know where that voice
Right. Right.
I
Which
hear
is
saying, I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Coming from that's somewhere.
wow. I know exactly what you're saying, and I know that feeling when it's coming out and it's making sense, but I didn't really
You're on
pre-plan it.
stage. Ooh, did I lose you?
I can hear you. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
You just got a little blur. Yeah, and so this is interesting because these lines between your intuition, connecting to your intuition, or what I feel like is like your inner voice, connecting to the sound of your voice, the sound as you're speaking. It's like we're kind of doing this in real time. It's really interesting. And then like your artistic voice or your vision, right? And it's like I feel even just in our conversation, all of these things being articulated in a way, or you know what I mean? So it's really super interesting. I guess I know that we're getting closer to ending and we could just go on and on and on. So that just means that we're supposed to like actually meet up and have lunch together. We're
Yes.
supposed to have a very good meal together. So
Yeah, absolutely.
we'll definitely do that. So I'm curious these days, just trying to think what I want to actually sort of end this with, but these days, what is it that you are dreaming about or feeling like you want to, experiment with? Is there anything in particular that you're feeling called to? And so I just also invite folks who are listening to think about this as well, because I love this idea. It's like I titled my book Finding the Power in Your Own Voice. And just like you were saying, it's not like I've like fully arrived. You know what I mean? I'm just like, I'm arriving, I'm falling, it's up and down, but there have been some things where I've gotten some certainty, right? Where you're like, yeah, I know that moment helped me, and so for folks who are also tuning in or watching this, it's like I invite you to think, what are you feeling called to love on and experiment with, or artistically or otherwise. But I'm curious if there's anything that's calling you these days.
Well, I think, well, I can say this. I have recently been, along with my partner and my other partner in Mark Hines and Sanford Figures and Guy Route, we have been appointed artists in residence at AMNH.
Wow.
The American Museum of Natural History, that is. And we are thinking about ways to combine my favorite place in the world, besides, like, Jamaica. My favorite would be the Natural History Museum. Like, I've always place as a child. I've loved it, loved it, loved it, loved it. And recently, it's been calling me in a lot of different ways. Not only wonderful appointment, which haven't quite digested, but I recently wrote an essay for the Romancipation Project that was talking about the museum and my love in general. So I feel like what's calling me, there's something about that space that's calling the people that are there, that work there. Like I said, one of my, my own spiritual ancestors, Zora Neale Hurston, her work is there through the anthropology department and Franz Boas. And so I I'm looking to see where those kinds of things, it's what being in this place that I love,
Mm.
there. Right now, I hear Zora calling out to me. You know, I hear Margaret Mead calling out to me. I hear people calling out to me about different things. And I hear Neil deGrasse Tyson calling out to me, even though he doesn't know it. You know, like I'm about to show up on him. Neil, let's talk about outer space, because I'm Gemini and all the planets are in Gemini right now. Like, but I feel like that those kinds of things are calling me, and more connection, like, you know, like this, exploring these ideas, and yeah, writing is to me.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I love that. I love that. I feel like in so many ways, talking right now was kind of like a reminder of one way, one version, a version of the artistic process, which is a lot of, what I like to talk about, and often what I'm teaching people, how to just connect to that within themselves. And so hearing you verbalize and like use the sound of your voice, to let it come out and express what that is like, is just, it's really nice to hear you articulate it. Before we finish, thank you. I just wanted to say, what are some ways, is there anything that you want to draw people's attention to, some ways that folks can kind of keep up with the work that you're doing, maybe with the Mask Project, or if there's anything in particular that you want to kind of point to for folks?
So, okay, I actually have a visual aid.
Yay, we love visuals.
So this is the Romancipation book that just came out, and that's a little special box set. But emancipation.org, you can go to emancipation.org. You can find out more about Mask Consortium at maskconsortium.org. But like, this is some of the fun stuff that we do. This is features some work by Moon Medicine, which is a multidisciplinary group started by, Stanford Biggers, but Jahi Sundance, who's also in that,
Yes.
and Martin Luther, and my hubby, they're all in that group. And then we have the lovely, lovely book, and here it is, and my essay's in here.
Ooh, I was gonna say, I want to read that essay.
Yeah, so that's my essay here, Alicia Hines.
Woo woo, beautiful.
Oh, and I want to shout out to my good friend Kimson, who took this photo. And that was me right before I went to Looking Glass that summer that I met you.
Oh my gosh. Full circle. Wow. Gorgeous. Okay, so
right. That's what I'm gonna do. I'll figure it out.
Yes. Well, Alicia, thank you so much for coming today to talk about the artistic process, to talk about intuition and inner voice and outer voice and artistic voice. Thank you so much for being a beta reader. I know we didn't talk about like the details of, what that was like, but I feel like this was so relevant to, I think, what just so many folks I know are going through. And I would love to hear you all who joined, leave a comment if you, if any of this resonated with you and how you connect to what's calling you artistically. So thank you so much, Alicia. And I'm definitely going to be reaching out. Let's have a meal very soon.
Very, very, very soon. All right, my dear. Love you.
Bye. Okay. Thank you. Bye.